Hi there, my name is Samuel Trapp. I'm your Russian-speaking American, and I think it's a travesty that they never, ever translate Vladimir Putin properly. It causes a lot of problems, and you always get these little cherry-picked statements that, oh gee, Vladimir Putin's threatening World War III. Vladimir Putin is threatening to blow up the world. Vladimir Putin is threatening to take over Europe. Vladimir Putin wants to expand back to the former borders of the Soviet Union and then take over Europe. Vladimir Putin insists upon nuclear war. All bullshit. And all of it, they never, ever translate him properly. They need a big bad bear, and he is the big bad bear. I saw a very interesting YouTube production a week or so ago by a Russian-speaking woman. I'll try to put the link to my page in a little bit. My background is I used to be in the on-site inspection agency, which was responsible for treaties between Russia and United States on the INF Treaty, Nuclear Threshold Test Ban Treaty were the two I was involved in, the START 1 and 2, Open Skies, all this. Now it's called the Nuclear Threat Reduction Agency. They're not doing a very good job at reducing any nuclear threats. In fact, they're ratcheting it up, pumping it up as far as they can get it. But I think it's important to listen to what Vladimir Putin has said. That half an hour that I spent watching this young lady's analysis of Vladimir Putin since 1995, way before he was president even, is very useful. And if Americans knew it, they wouldn't believe this horse shit that people are trying to pump down your throat. They're trying to make Russia your enemy. Russia has no desire to be your enemy. Vladimir Putin has no desire to be your enemy. Anybody who tells you any different is a liar. Anybody who tells you any different can't understand what's placed in front of them. Anybody that says any different is selling you something. They're selling you this NATO dream that NATO is still necessary somehow, and it's still necessary for the United States to lead NATO somehow. These are not accurate descriptions of reality. And I listen, and I'm a historian. I've listened to Vladimir Putin. I practiced law for a number of years. I've got a good insight into this. I know how arms control treaties work. I know what we did. I know what he said. And in 2001, the guy was on a TV program here in the United States. He didn't come to the U.S. for it, but he was being interviewed by a United States reporter, and they asked him about joining NATO, and he said that it isn't out of the realm of possibilities, and he'd like to. Why not? Nobody paid attention to that. When he asked Bush 1, nope, not granted. When in 2007, it was brought up again about some of the coming into NATO. This man has been consistent since 1995 in what he's been saying. That Ukraine is a part of Russia. Ukraine didn't exist until 2001, ever, just so you know. And they were not separate. It was a part of Russia. It was created by Russia. Now, you can say I'm a Putin hack somewhere if you want to. I'm a history hack. Go look at it. Go look it up objectively. Please do your own research. And our morons that are hacking for more war and more war aren't doing you any favors with what they're saying. And you need to figure it out for yourselves. I want to give a brief overview of what Vladimir Putin said in his speech, and his speech before the Presidium a month ago, and his interview with Tucker Carlson, which was interesting. I watched that in Russian, and I just watched his interview with a guy named Kiselev, and I forget where he's from. He's got Russian background, or he's from Russia, because his Russian is better than mine. and my Russian is pretty good. And I listened to Putin in Russian, and he basically started off with, softball questioning at first, and started out with his State of the Union address, his own, which was about a month ago, which was interesting to listen to. The difference between our country and his, when it comes to that, he gave a real State of the Union and what the Union is about, his country, and what they plan to do going forward. Ours was nothing but some old hack trying to place blame on other people, not telling you the truth about anything, and then saying, give me this and I'll fix the border. You're the one that destroyed the border. That guy don't think of his country at all. You can say a lot of things about Vladimir Putin. You can believe or not whether he is a good or bad person. I don't care. But he's definitely working for the what he believes to be best for his country. And it starts with what they proposed and what they're going to do. And he spoke specific dollars in the budget that he's going to give. And he was given huge amounts of money for families, huge amounts of money for children. And he said it's based on conservative growth. And he said it's amazing that in the world where his country is subject to 15,000 different sanctions, that they're still growing. And their economy is now 5th in the world. They passed up Germany, and they are now the 5th. They're the largest economy in Europe for sure. And he claims that if the income and growth keep going the way it's going, he's going to be, not he, the country of Russia, is going to pass up Japan quite soon and be number 4. And that's going to happen. Japan is quite a bit smaller. It might not be as fast as we think, but the sanctions aren't hurting Russia. The sanctions are helping Russia. And it's causing them to look inward and create things and have their economy is booming. And so he was talking about those things and spending money on what they need, which is development. And he's such a good speaker, number one, that if you aren't watching him, you should. And somebody should translate him properly because they're not doing it. He said all of the other countries, industrialized countries, growth didn't go up as high as it had the year before. They didn't have the sustained growth. But Russia's was sustained, actually bigger. We saw a bit of a decline. They didn't have as big of inflation as we did. And he said, we understand who we are dealing with. He was talking about the West. We understand who we are dealing with. And they keep wanting to drag us into an arms race. And we can afford the arms race, and they can't. Is basic. It's not exactly what he said, but that's basically what he meant. He said, they keep having all these bases all over the world. We don't have any of that. He said during USSR times, there was a 13% GDP is what the Soviet Union spent on arms. When he was talking about arms races, he said Soviet Union spent 13% on arms. And the U.S. is spending quite a bit more. He said right now, he said they were several years ago at 4% and kept it around 4%, that now, because of what's going on, they're at about 6.8%, but they'd like to hold it around there, and they believe that they can use the rest of the budget to afford all the great programs that he was talking about. They're giving families money for having children. If you have more children, you get more money. They're trying to entice you into having more children because they believe that's the future. They're very focused on the family. They're very focused on going forward. This is not the evil empire that they want you to believe over here. It's just not. And if you've been there, you'd realize it's not also. And I've been there fairly recently and plan to go back again. I got to check my notes here, but I'm driving. All of their budget, that's what he was saying, that the budget of the West is all spent upon, the U.S. is spent upon having these bases all over the world that are unnecessary. He spoke about how France and the U.S., and we're still colonizing and putting colony bases all over the planet that are really nothing more than efforts to control the local place and our massive colonial empire. And that Russia's not that way. They get invited to Africa when African countries are booting out France. And so he was making fun of Macron for that, and that was fun. He said that, going back to the family thing, he said that 70% of men and 72% of women in a recent survey in Russia stated that they would prefer to have a family of children with 2 or more children. That's a big switch because it used to be much smaller, one family, no kids. He said that there was a great drop, both after World War II and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that now it's coming back up. And I'm telling you, I've been over there recently, and the number of children running around is, you watch families everywhere. Their malls are packed with kids. There are kids everywhere. And there are people that, they're thinking positively. They're thinking growth. They're thinking family. They're thinking all of the things that you would think that we're thinking in America, but we're not. We're thinking, I don't know, how do we protect transgenders? And I don't care about transgenders. Trans are great. Good for you. Be transgender. That's great. Just quit shoving that shit down my throat. Just be who you want to be. I don't care. Let me be who I want to be. And if I want to have a family and say that I don't support the gay life or the transgender life, I don't want to be burned at the stake for it. You can't burn people at the stake for thinking religiously in their own beliefs. It's nonsense. I honor your beliefs. Why don't you honor mine? You just won't do it. And I feel the same way about what we're doing in Russia, trying to cancel an entire country because of Ukraine. And if you think that Ukraine, that the people are really for this, you might have a group that are, but there are tons of them. In fact, I would my own personal numbers, I haven't done a survey, but what I see, and I watch a lot of it, is I think it's about a 50-50 split, if not more in favor of the side of Russia. I'm not saying they don't want to be with the side of NATO, but they'd be just as happy with the side of Russia, is my point. And, they have a lot more in common, religiously, politically, historically, and everything you read now, they're trying to cut out Russia. I did an AI thing and tried to get a story about Russia and Ukraine, and it is so twisted, you wouldn't believe it, because everything that they're getting is tilted so far to one side that you're certainly not getting the truth, and everything is pro-Ukraine, and it's, truthfully, it's not going to be. And if you think Ukraine's going to win this war, you better think again. And no amount of money that the U.S. pumps into this is going to change that fact. And sending that's another thing that Putin talked about, my next page here. They value every loss of life that's over there, but they don't want anyone to be disillusioned that they don't already know that the UN, France, Poland, U.S., they've all been participating already, and Russia has already killed a pretty good number of NATO and Western soldiers and mercenaries, they call them, and they've already killed a bunch of them. And Russia knows it, everybody else knows it, but they're trying to keep it quiet. Well, now Macron is saying that he wants to send over people to fight for Ukraine because Putin can't be allowed to take over the world. That wasn't his desire, and if you haven't watched the history of how this developed, how he kept saying that there, and that's the next point to get to, is talks. And the reason that Putin, they said, are you open to talks? And if you remember from Tucker Carlson's interview, he said he was open to talks, and they always have been. When this thing first started in February of 2022, in April of 2022, they were in Turkey and they were having discussions, and the leader of the delegation from Ukraine signed, Vladimir Putin says he has it in his possession, signed a working copy of a draft for creating an agreement. And they've never been against it. And he met with Western leaders, whoever that was, whether it was Boris Johnson, whether it was phone calls to the United States, whether it was Newland, whether it was whoever. They said, no, you can't accept that, because they believed they can beat Russia on the field of battle, that Ukraine could beat Russia on the field of battle. They had an extremely low opinion of Russians' military power. And that was idiot. That was a bunch of idiots, people who don't understand life and what's really going on. And your so-called experts sure as hell aren't experts. And so he said, we have never rejected talks, and we'd like to talk again. But from our side, those only stopped after we agreed to the negotiations. And that's what I remember hearing from both sides, that they had a rough draft put, and it was the West that convinced Ukraine not to go forward with those talks. And then he said, he was asked what it would take to get him to talk, and he said, well, now we're ready for talks, but the desires have to be based upon the realities on the ground now, which means you're not getting any territory back, and you never should have anyway, because there were, this is my own words, was because there were referendums in Donbass area, and also in Kherson, and possibly in Odessa, where if you did a vote, an election, true democracy, we only believe in democracy if it goes in our favor, is what the U.S. But if they voted to go with Russia, which they did in the Donbass region, well, that's not democracy. That's something we got to fight for and kill them. Kill them because they don't want to go with democracy as we see it. Well, that's not how they see it. And he said, so number one, in order for us to want to speak going forward, we have to discuss any settlement based upon the realities on the ground right now. Number two, somehow they have to be convinced that the West can be trusted. And he can tell you why. And he gave several examples. He said, first of all, they said, and we will not, George Bush 1 said, and I remember the speech, we will get rid of the Warsaw Pact, and we will not expand 1 inch further east. Now, Vladimir Putin is still pissed off about that, and I don't blame him, because immediately we started spreading weapons further and further to the east into Warsaw Pact countries, after we said we wouldn't. There are also arguments, not in this speech, there are arguments that NATO shouldn't be around anyway, because the Warsaw Pact was gone, there was no need for NATO. But remember, Putin tried to join NATO, or said he wasn't against joining NATO, but he's never been invited and nobody seriously considered it. Because you have to have a big bad enemy from somewhere. And you can't have him in there. And remember, the goal was to take them over because they were down and out for the count, and we thought that it's always been a personality war, because nobody likes Vladimir Putin. And nobody ever has liked Vladimir Putin. In the West anyway. I'm not saying I like him. I don't care one way or the other. I just think that he should be listened to. He's a leader of a large country. So number one, he said he's pissed off that they said they won't go east and they went east. Number two, in Ukraine, they said that they would guarantee safety and guarantee all these things. And the next thing you know, this was 2014. The next thing you know, Maidan occurred, and they had a takeover of the government. A takeover of the government occurred the next day, well, the next month, that they took over after they had said they would provide safety guarantees and wouldn't do it. Then they signed the Minsk Accords, which now they've admitted were nothing but a scam to give them more time to figure out how to deal with Russia. I watched a speech where Zelensky said, "Oh no, we those Minsk Accords, we never planned to honor those." And the French and the Germans backed that same thing up. They said, "Oh, we only signed those things to get Putin to play along for a while and give us more time to build up the Ukrainian army." That's indisputable. That has happened. Okay, so he said there'd have to be something to ensure that what they tell us now. He said we always go into it with open eyes. We realize that it's a big world out there. We don't want to kill people, and we don't want us to be killed. And we go into it in a friendly, trying to cooperate and get something done. And instead, we're always taken advantage of, and they trick us. they trick us or they fool us saying one thing and doing another. He's talking about the West. That is absolutely true. So he said we have to be careful that that our little battles and guarantees need to be addressed. They're very serious, and they have to provide for the safety of Russia. And if they do, which means no NATO in Ukraine, if they do provide for the safety of Russia, and he can even get the feeling, you don't want to kill people, you don't want the countries to be at war forever, then there's a possibility that he will agree to something, as long as it's based on the realities on the ground right now. But we always thought, well, the idiots that are running the country now always thought that we could beat Russia on the ground. We can't, or we would have. Well, Ukraine can't, or we would have. And we're perfectly willing to sacrifice Ukraine and all their people. So that is part two. He said they have 20 years, and there's been 20 years that he's been around, have been nothing but lies. He actually said, I don't trust anyone. He said, I'm sorry, I don't trust anyone. And I need to have some kind of a guarantee that I'm allowed to believe and have it, be backed up. Well, that's kind of hard to do when all you got running the show are people who lied to us. I mean, they don't even tell us the truth. Why would they tell him the truth? They fool him, and that's the way it goes. That's our history, folks, is we try to trick people. But he said, even all that being said, I'd still speak to them. I prefer that they not use empty words. His words, they don't use empty words and while they're speaking to us. We won't do anything that doesn't address our interests and the interests of Russia. And then the interviewer said, well, what about that rooster Macron and the stuff that he's spouting off? And this is where Putin said, well, Macron thinks he wants to have people in there to fight against. He said, whoever they send, whatever people, whatever equipment, it's not going to work. Whatever it is, it's not going to return the lands that want to stay with Russia. It's not going to do it. And he kind of poked fun at Macron because Macron, getting booted out. This is where he talked about getting his own armies booted out of Africa while Russia's being invited in. And so it's a very interesting times. This was a very interesting speech. He also talked about the Polish saber rattling that's going on, and said, and he gave a bit of I saw it listed as a warning somewhere, that they wanted to call it a warning. It's not a warning. It's a reality. Poland has desires to take back some of the northern parts of Ukraine that they believe historically are parts of Poland, and that they want them there. Well, now they're trying to get Ukraine to invite them in onto Ukraine's northern border, so that the troops that are on the northern border that are protecting against Belarus, allegedly, holding that line, and in Poland, they say, listen, invite our troops in. We'll take those. You can send yours off to the east so they can keep fighting against Vladimir Putin, the big aggressor. And Putin said, well, if we do that, he said, if they do that, they just better realize now that Poland troops are never leaving. They'll stay there, and then you'll end up fighting them as well. And he's always said that. And he said that in something similar in the Tucker Carlson interview. And it's pretty interesting because he's a big historian, and he understands his history, and he understands where they came from. You heard that in the first half hour of the interview he gave to Tucker Carlson. Very interesting. More importantly, he said if Polish soldiers are allowed there, they'll take that place over. It's not that they won't leave; they'll take it over, and they want to. They believe blah blah blah. I want to go too far in there. Macron is saying the same thing. He said something about 2 million. There's been some offers to have soldiers come from South Korea, and he said, the interview asked him, are some of these people coming, or they're making these offers to work together because they're trying to get under the nuclear umbrella? And something that kind of Moscow's nuclear umbrella, and something that kind of surprised me because I didn't know the answer. But Putin said in that speech, he said, well, as far as trying to get under our nuclear umbrella, they don't need our umbrella. They have their own. Well, okay, so they have their own nuclear umbrella. That's not something that I was aware of. And maybe I misunderstood him. I don't think so. And I rewound it and thought of it again. And so, at any rate, he said that South Korea doesn't have anything like that. France used the words, there is no red line as far as Russia any longer. And the only thing that you might take as a threat, because in response to what Macron said, the only thing that would be even remotely threatening is responding and saying the same thing. He said, well, if Macron says there's no red line that they won't cross as far as dealing with Russia, then there's no red line that we won't cross dealing with France. And, France wouldn't stand a chance unless they can somehow get NATO to go along. Then he started speaking about, and I found this extremely interesting. He started speaking about new NATO members, and it was interesting how he put it, because the interviewer asked him, "What do you think of the new members of NATO?" And he said, "Listen, we've never had any problem with Sweden. We've never had any problem with Finland. We've never had any problem with any of those. We've been friends, and we never had to have soldiers on either side. We never had to have anything." He said, well, now we do. Now, since he goes, there's never been large contingents of forces on either side. And now NATO is trying to build bases in Finland, which means that Russia will have to follow suit and have people along that border. He said that the same thing goes with where Sweden is. Now, Sweden doesn't necessarily touch, and in that area, he said, in that entire area, and he believes that this is why, and this I never knew to be true. He said that when you would go there to Sweden and to Finland, you would find tons of Russian language signs, tons of Russian people. People were buying property. People were buying houses. People were living in the area. Russian-speaking people in large numbers that were allowed to go back and forth and were living in Sweden and Finland. And he believes that NATO used that as kind of an arm twister because Russian wealth is spreading westward. And he thought that it was reasonable to believe, and it is kind of reasonable to believe, I don't know, I haven't researched it enough, but his point makes sense, that these people moving in were kind of like us, in America. All the people coming in that don't speak English. You're sitting there going, man, we're in America. Speak English. And that was 20, 30 years ago. Nobody does it anymore. We just understand that there's different cultures and different languages everywhere. And but he said that he believes that's how they got the NATO issues through the door, is because they were, some sort of Russophobia, and getting people to believe that Russophobia is, something that needs to be spread out. You're supposed to hate Russia because Russia is on the way up. That is for darn sure. Okay, then he got into the U.S. elections, and he said that there's some idiots out there claiming that he's trying to do election interference, and there's also some idiots on the other way that say the U.S. is trying to interfere with Russian elections this month. And he said that he believes that to be true, that these incursions from northern Ukraine into Russian territory, near the Belgorod area and one other area, and it said 300-400 soldiers, including NATO people and foreign mercenaries that were coming over. He said they killed a bunch of them, and you can see these on YouTube if you look, and you can find them. And there's a lot of them in Russian speaking that you can find, so I've seen them all, and it's rather interesting what they put in there. He said, these are these are the things that we're not trying to influence their elections, and I don't care one way or the other. The speaker said, well, you said you would prefer Biden over Trump. And he said, yeah, a lot has been made of that. And he said that before Trump left office, one of his last conversations with Trump, he said that he had heard that that Trump preferred Biden even way back then. And Trump said, why would, and these were Putin's words, he said, why would you want to have Sleepy Joe? He said, why would you want to have Sleepy Joe and not me? And Putin said he never thought much about it. And they had that conversation. That was one of the last things they said the last time they spoke. And he said that the American election process, what we're going through right now, he said he doesn't want to have anything to do with it, but it's uncivilized and openly non-democratic. He said they're not democratic in any way. And he said that, people, everything that they say is twisted and not told the truth. Well, we all know that. And but he said that it's not something that he's willing to participate in. He said that in 2011, Biden, when he claimed to have met with Putin, and that that they were, how did he put it? That Biden met with Putin and came back across and was that he was had said some negative things about what Putin had to say at that time, and that even then Trump was wondering why in the world that Putin would still prefer to have Biden in office, because the last time Biden came over as a vice president is the last time that they met, at least during the Obama administration. The interviewer asked him, he says, well, don't you feel like kind of with Trump and with what's going on with NATO and the horn blowing on the side of the Americans, that there's some kind of a large game of chicken going on? And then he explained what a game of chicken was. I know what it is, but he had to explain it, or he did explain it to Putin. I don't know if maybe Putin had heard the expression before or not, but he called it a game of chicken and how they were doing it in his questioning. The U.S. has said that it will not intervene in any elections in Russia. Biden's a traditional politician. He was talking about why he would prefer why he said his preference was Biden and not Trump. And he said that this chicken fight hopefully leads to, whoever comes into office, into something that will address the needs that he was talking about in the beginning of his speech, that will protect the country of Russia and his position in it. And that was interesting. But that he's always ready to talk if they're willing to talk openly. And then there was a discussion about nuclear war and about nuclear weapons. And they were talking about a gentleman by the name of Alexander Dugin, who, I apologize, I really don't know that person, who basically said something in the book that he wrote that said the more prepared you are for nuclear war, the less likely it is to occur. And Putin said he kind of ascribes to that theory. The interviewer asked him about that, and he said, well, yes, we are prepared. He said that we are definitely the most advanced nuclear power, which I believe to be true. That he talked about the treaties that have been unilaterally destroyed by the United States or failed to be ratified by the United States. And I know about these because I participated in these processes way back when. And that he said that the Russians, for their part, have voluntarily followed the limitations set forth in these treaties, even though the U.S. was not. They still did. And that goes for all of it. But they have used it as an opportunity to develop their weapons. But he said the fact that testing nuclear weapons, you can't really do it over a computer. You need to see what your capabilities have produced, and they may go back to underground nuclear testing. I don't think they'll do any above ground, and I didn't hear anything about above ground, but I don't believe that's what he intended or that's what he meant when he was saying it. So he did say we are definitely prepared if we have to be, along the lines of what Alexander Dugin said. And he said when new weapons are developed, they would like to test them, but so far they haven't done anything underground. But we are definitely ready. And he said that in large letters. He said that. And we haven't changed our desire to, or our lack of desire to use nuclear weapons. And, that's what he wanted to put out there. But if somebody forced it upon us, we're prepared. In the means of we're prepared. Walk softly, carry a big stick is what he's saying. Same exact thing. He said it's funny because they talked about spreading things further and further to the east. He said we aren't exploiters of other cultures and people. They are, the West. The West is the exploiter culture. That everywhere we go, we exploit everything that people own, take all the stuff, and that the rest of the world, frankly, is tired of it. That is what Putin said. And he said Western propaganda isolating Russia is really doesn't seem to be working. Certainly isn't working with people like me. And this one hit me straight when he said, he goes, well, when people know they're being lied to, they feel it in their hearts. And that's true. People feel it in their hearts because they just know it's not true. He said the people that are blinded by Russophobia thought in 2002 they could destroy Russia and that they would defeat Russia on the battlefield. People were rubbing their hands together and saying, we're going to beat Russia on the battlefield. And he said, and that turned out not to be true. And now they're just trying to figure out how to save face so that they can continue to maintain the level of power that they had before. They were all banking on the power, but everyone involved in this fiasco was banking on the power of the United States. But the idea is now starting to be more widespread by people like me, by people like Scott Ritter, by people like Tucker Carlson, by people who don't accept what the media is pumping down your throat. Those people who know what's going on are beginning to have a voice. And he said, the dealing with people that run the mass media in the West, dealing with those people, those dangerous people, he called them, it's really much easier to fight with them and force them to take your way than it is to deal with them, because they're never going to tell you the truth. And boy, I couldn't have said it any better. And listening to why he's done this is a man who's lived it. This is a man who's lived the trickery of the West for 30 years. And I've been watching from the sidelines, but I've been watching it too. He was talking about Belgorod and the craziness of trying to attack them. And he's saying, this is the last thing that he said in his report or in his interview. He said that the reasons that, they're talking about the attacks into Belgorod, that they attacked a children's, and well, it's adults too, but a regional outdoor recreation facility on a Sunday morning. They sent bombs into that place. One of them literally, he didn't say this part, this is something I watched otherwise. One bomb went into this lady's head and blew her up and killed a couple of children, killed this lady, of course, and wounded a great number of others and destroyed the sport complex where people were exercising. We don't hear anything about it. And he said that the reason they're doing those sorts of things and the reason that they're bombing Russian gas storage facilities and Russian interests and threatening to bomb the Kremlin and threatening to bomb all of those things is because they're desperate. Now, everybody knows that. If you're a strategic thinker at all, you know that if the war is 150 miles to the west along the Dnieper River, and that's where people are fighting, and you have incursions into Russia, into Belgorod, to blow up children and old ladies and for political gain, and you want to send a huge drone attack to sink ships in the Black Sea, or to blow up gas supply and storage facilities in the territory of Russia, or threaten to do those sorts of bombings, you're desperate. and you're trying to show, you're on the end. Well, we'll show you. We'll blow up your stuff. He said they feel that some of their nuclear plants, they're concerned about that those might be a target. Over here, people have said, oh, gee, Vladimir Putin's going to attack a nuclear plant in Ukraine. He wants to take it over. I'm sure of that. It's in the area that he wants to control. But if you think about it, it's far more likely, and knowing what I know, and you don't have to believe me, I just know, I like to get the word straight from the horse's mouth. And nobody else does, apparently. And they just go on with these. Every leader in our country sits around and talks about how Vladimir Putin is trying to take over the world. It's like Pinky in the Brain. What's Putin trying to do today? Same thing he does every day, trying to take over the world. It's one of my favorite shows from a long time ago. But craziness, that is not what he's saying. I do not believe that's what he's doing. And the idiots who are saying such, I would be happy to debate them at any time. I listen to him in Russian. I enjoy listening to him in Russian. He's very well spoken. Sometimes when men speak in Russian, hard to understand them. They kind of marbly mouthed. But he's very clear, and I get far more than 95% of what he's saying when he speaks first time through without having to do it twice. And so he's very well spoken. And this was a very clear discussion of where he thinks the world is. And I hope you've enjoyed my analysis of this interview with Mr. Kiselev. I'm sorry if I said it wrong, but Vladimir Vladimirovich did a very good job in that, as like he always does. Doesn't have cue cards, doesn't have a teleprompter. He's just answering questions. And tell you what, whether you believe I'm a Putin stooge or not, guy's a hell of a lot smarter than what we have to deal with, sadly. And it's fighting against Biden is having to fight against an unarmed man, and that is unfortunate for our country. And I hope that Trump doesn't get in there, if he does, and not address the necessity of treating Russia like the power that they are, because they're not going away. And if we're not careful, we're going to lose far more than our number one ranking as a superpower. So I appreciate you listening. My name is Samuel Trapp. You can watch my channel. I got plenty of good stuff. Did this one in English. I do a lot of them in Russian. And I'd be happy to discuss any of these things with anyone at any time. samtrap1@gmail.com. Have a nice day.